What is up, ladies and gentlemen? I'm Jarcolic8704 here to bring you a little bit of a special video. Talking about my life, because I love doing that. These are just funny, quirky, me being an idiot, because being a kid and being a wrestling fan while you're a kid is just one of the biggest mistakes you can ever make to yourself, because eventually you're going to be an 18-year-old talking about the embarrassing things you did as a wrestling fan. So, I am here to tell you, I have a couple stories. I might sporadically just throw in little tidbits of information about my life as a wrestling fan, but these are more of, the face palm, like, stupid stories I did as a kid. Anyway, first one. I probably mentioned this before, but it was when I was like 3 or 4 years old when I first started watching wrestling. My first exposure to wrestling was some of the WCW tapes that my brother had. and he had Goldberg, Who's Next, and Sting Back in Black. And I would watch the Sting Back in Black movie every single day, and I'd recite it. And I had all my Sting merch, because at Toys R Us they had like a little like Sting WCW gift set, and it was like a mask, a shirt, a bat, and a title belt that had Sting's name on it. And I would watch this movie every single day, and I could recite it. I literally could recite Sting Back in Black for you guys right now if I wanted to. Anyway, I was watching it, and eventually, I would watch it for a little bit, and then, the more I watched it, I decided to up the ante a little bit, and I grabbed like a stuffed Pooh Bear and a stuffed Tigger doll that I had, and they were probably like maybe a foot, maybe like a foot and a half tall, and I would wrestle them like they were my opponents. And, I'd do whatever Sting would do. And one of the matches, I think it was Sting versus Rick Steiner from the Great American Bash. I went, Sting went to the top rope, and I went to the top of my couch. Sting did a big splash onto Rick Steiner. And I thought, all right, well, Pooh Bear, you're getting this. So I jump off the couch, land a little awkwardly, and I broke my arm. Of course, I didn't know that at first, because to me, as a 4-year-old, I was just screaming and crying, and my mom came into the room because, my mom expected, I'm just a stupid little kid watching, Sting wrestle on TV. She doesn't have to worry about anything, right? Oh, no, wrong. I jump off the couch and I fall on my arm. I break it, but she didn't know that at first. She didn't really see me fall, which, again, might sound bad, but trust me, I turned out fine. Anyway, the next day, we go to the mall and like I can't lift up my pizza or anything like that. And she's like, all right, something might be wrong. So she took me to our local hospital and they took some x-rays and they said, nothing's wrong with his arm. And then she was like, well, I don't know if that's true because there's this indentation in his arm and he can't lift anything. And he's, and I'm left-handed and it was my left arm that I broke. So I wasn't using my dominant hand at all. And she's like, he's left-handed and shit like that. And the doctor was like, all right, let's do one more test. And, they did another X-ray, and my arm was broken. So that's that. And the funny thing is, I could decide what color cast I wanted, and you think I would have chosen black because of Sting, but I went blue because of Blue's Clues. But yeah, no, that's how I broke my arm as a little kid. I got all my pre-K students to sign it and shit like that, and it was a fun time. I thought the cast was pretty cool, but after a while it got pretty annoying. And then after I broke my arm is when I started buying WWE DVDs, like Survivor Series 2002, SummerSlam 2002, and some of the 2003 pay-per-views. And that's when they had that "please don't try this at home" warning. And to me that's always that whole those whole commercials have been hilarious just because of the fact that I broke my arm pretending to wrestle, and I did exactly what they didn't want me to do, but still. Anyway, now this one's probably the funniest just because I'm an idiot, but probably around, no, it was around 2004. So I was in first grade and watching Raw, watching SmackDown, and it was leading up to WrestleMania 20. And as you guys know, one of the matches for WrestleMania 20 was an evening gown match. It was Stacy Keibler and Miss Jackie versus Sable and Tori Wilson. And the storyline was Sable and Tori Wilson got on the cover of Playboy while Stacy and Jackie didn't, and Stacy and Jackie wanted to prove that the Raw girls are just as good as the SmackDown girls, and yada yada yada. I didn't know what Playboy was. Obviously, I was like 6, so I just assumed it was some magazine that Sable and Tori Wilson were on the cover of. I had never heard of it. I had never seen it at like local bookstores or something like that. So I just kind of assumed that it was just some magazine I never heard of. So I was at the mall with my brother and my dad, and my dad had to go to a mini mart to buy something. I can't remember what it was, but it was like this little mini mart in the food court that it was basically like a drugstore basically. And I walked in, and there was a magazine section, and I was just walking around, and I saw the adult magazines, if you will, and I saw the Playboy logo. And it was pretty. It was in my reach. If they had these adult magazines, you think they put them on taller shelves because a 6-year-old was able to get his hands on them. Granted, they're wrapped up and shit like that, so I can't open the pages, but still. And I see Playboy, and I saw blonde hair because the magazine was cut off by a magazine in front of it, so I just saw the Playboy logo with some blonde hair. And I looked up and I pulled it up, and it was Tori Wilson and Sable. And I didn't like go up to the cashier and said, I'll take it, but I was looking at the magazine just because I knew these two girls. I didn't think, oh hell yeah, these are Sable and Tori Wilson. Can't wait to see these pictures. I just thought of it as these are two women I see on WWE TV. And eventually, as I'm a 6-year-old holding this Playboy magazine, the customers are looking at me, and my dad's like, "The fuck are you doing?" And I was like, I don't know. This is Sable and Tori Wilson, Dad from SmackDown." And then he took the magazine from me, and you know, he took the magazine and put it back on the shelf. He didn't buy it for himself, if that's what you guys are thinking. Anyway, that's that story. That's pretty big facepalm moment. Anyway, another thing I can bring out to you guys are my collection of wrestling action figures. I loved the WWE toys. I had a collection of belts too, the little plastic belts. The Velcro never stayed on the belts, which kind of sucked. I'd always wear a different belt around the house every day. I was such an idiot. I had the WWE Tag Team Championship belt. I had the World Heavyweight Championship. I had the Undisputed Championship. I had John Cena's Spinner Championship, and I had the IC title. I think that was it. Oh, the first title I had was the old school Winged Eagle Attitude Era Championship. I had that title too. And the Velcro never stayed on them, so I could never wear them. So I just had to sling them around my shoulder. And then I remember the first couple action figures I had were my brother's old WCW ones, and he had a Sting, Goldberg, Kevin Nash, Macho Man. I think those were the four and Sid Vicious. I remember those. And all of them got destroyed just because I was so rough with the action figures. Like Kevin Nash lost both of his hands. Goldberg, I think, is just a torso and a head. And Randy Savage lost both legs. Sting stayed intact, and so did Sid Vicious. And then I remember I was always looking for a Chris Jericho action figure because by then Chris Jericho was my favorite wrestler when I was around 5 or 6. And I remember my brother got me a Chris Jericho action figure for Christmas. And, I was hyped because I saw, Chris Jericho written on the top of it. And I was like, oh my God, it's the best present ever. And the action figure, they must have modeled Jericho when he was super wasted because this looks nothing like him. His face is all jacked, his hair is really weird. And, I was I was low key really happy because, this was Chris Jericho action figure. This is what I wanted. But then again, it looked like total ass. And his tights, they weren't modeled after any sort of tights he wore. They were literally just almost like athletic pants. He looked really, really weird. And then I remember I was with my grandparents, and I saw another Chris Jericho action figure out of Walmart, and I begged them for it. I mean, granted, they're only what, 10, 15 bucks. So and my grandparents got one for me, and it was, a Chris Jericho action figure, and the gear he had was the gear from WrestleMania 19, and it looked just like him. And I called my brother, I remember on the way back from the Walmart. I called my brother and I was like, yeah, guess what? This Chris Jericho action figure actually looks like Chris Jericho. And I'm sure my brother felt bad because, he granted, he was, he's 8 years older than me. So by the time I was 6, he was 14. So, a 14-year-old kid trying to, get a good present for his brother. And I probably made him feel like a total ass, but, whatever. I bought so many Chris Jerichos. I had the crappy Chris Jericho. I had the Chris Jericho with the WrestleMania 19 gear, the Chris Jericho with the WrestleMania 20 gear, the Chris Jericho with, it's he had the WrestleMania 20 gear, but it was red. And I remember that one. That one didn't have knee pads because, one thing I always noticed about Chris Jericho is that he always had knee pads outside of his gear where most people wear them, under their tights. He wore them on the outside. And I remember I stripped the knee pads off of like a Shelton Benjamin action figure, and I put them on Chris Jericho because my Chris Jericho needed to have the knee pads because that's the authentic Jericho look. And Jericho never lost a match, and no matter how many times. And in my own, little wrestling promotion world, Chris Jericho was he was the John Cena. He never put anyone over, never lost, just annihilated everyone. Anyway, so there was that, and I remember the rings. My dad hated putting the rings together because the fucking turnbuckles and ropes. It took him forever. And I remember I had 3 rings throughout my career as a professional pro wrestling action figure user, and I had one that was a Nitro ring, and it would count 3 if you press the center. And then I had a WWE ring with red, white, and blue ropes, and then I had an Undertaker ring that glowed in the dark, and that one would always be my favorite. All right, so that was the action figure story, and then this one I love. I love this one so much. And the problem is, like, I don't know any other wrestling fans besides my brother. He's like the only one that would get this joke. But this will always make me laugh. In second grade, I was in second grade, we were learning about adjectives. And I just said the word adjective, and like, I'm sure all of you know where this is going. So my teacher decided, because there were 26 kids in my class, every kid would get a letter. And then we'd go down the row, and everyone would say an adjective that started with the letter that they got. So I go over and pick my letter, and the idea of an adjective was still kind of, it was still not, clicking with me. I'm not an idiot, but maybe I was just stupid back then. I just couldn't understand what an adjective was, and I kind of was just throwing out words till I got something right. So I go over to get my letter, and I get my letter, and it's P. And I'm like, oh, okay, think of an adjective that starts with P. I could have said pink, purple, prickly, petulant, pudgy, whatever. There's so many different P words I could use. And, eventually I was like, all right, P, what can I get? And eventually my teacher called on me, and I was like, oh, P, I got to think of an adjective that starts with letter P. And then I remembered to the Monday Night War DVD with Kevin Nash. Quote, look at the adjective, play. And I thought, I got it. So I said to my teacher, play. And the whole class laughed because they were like, you idiot, that is not an adjective. And my teacher was like, try again, that's not an adjective. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I remember that adjectives could be colors, so I was like, pink. And then I felt like a total idiot, but Kevin Nash, he does not come in clutch, when I needed him most. And the last story I'm going to tell, third grade. This really isn't, I really can't remember the details, probably because my mind was completely blown. It was what? Let me check the date. It was probably, well, I can just say the Raw, and you guys will know exactly where this is going. The Raw after New Year's Revolution 2006. Yes, I was in third grade, and I remember there was the opening segment of Raw, and then they showed a preview for Edge and Lita's live sex celebration. And I thought, no way. Like, what? Get out. Yeah. Normally, I did not stay up for Raw. I really didn't have a bedtime, per se. But, I would just be knocked out. Like, I would just be tired from the day. And, I wouldn't be able to stay up till 11 because I was just worn out. But I made it my mission. I made it my mission to watch Raw so I could see Edge and Lita's live sex celebration because I thought some shit was gonna go down. I don't know what. I mean, I knew what sex was because I'd had the talk, but I had not been exposed to that type of world, and I thought, what the hell's gonna happen? I mean, they can't actually show that on TV, right? I mean, the only sexual thing I ever saw on WWE programming was when Miss Jackie like flashed someone during one of Rico's matches. That's the only thing that ever really happened sexually. I mean, I didn't watch during the Attitude Era, so I missed all that shit. When Miss Kitty like flashed the crowd, and Sable had the handprints on her boobs and shit like that. I had never seen anything like that, so I made it my mission to stay up. And I can't say I was disappointed because what would you expect from a network television program? But let's just say I was totally oblivious to the fact that when Lita was going under the covers, I had no idea what was happening there. And just look, like, I can't look back. I mean, obviously, no one is going to look back on this segment with fond memories, but like, this is like every time I watch it, I just cringe at how, like, the 8-year-old me was like freaking out with like, is anything gonna happen? Like I was set on seeing some Lita boob. I can't lie. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. That was what my 8-year-old mindset was because like my mind was about to be completely blown. But that's what happened. And then all that happened was well, like Ric Flair interfered for a second, then Edge beat him up, and then they went back to it, and then John Cena came out, and then Lita was under the covers, and John Cena ripped the blanket off, and I was like, hell yeah! And then she had Edge's t-shirt on. I was like, ah, shit. So I went to bed very disappointed that night, but, maybe it's for the best. But yeah, those are, if you guys have any embarrassing stories, feel free to leave them in the comments. Again, I will never judge anything you did, because you're talking to the kid who picked up a Playboy magazine simply because Tori Wilson and Sable were on the cover and stayed up till 11 when he knew he was tired to watch Edge and Lita's live sex celebration because he wanted to see some Lita action. Whatever, I'll own up to it. I'll be honest with you guys because you know what? That's what I do.